really struck me the most was being in a room, and in my mind it's a huge auditorium, but I think it was the Boston Temple Room, which it's not that large physically, but it seemed to be extremely large. And it was filled with devotees, so there was standing room only, literally. And I was in the back of the room, and Srila Prabhupada was glancing around the room. And you know how your eyes, you meet someone, and my eyes and his eyes locked for the briefest fraction of a second. But I felt that in this huge room there was a personal connection between myself and Srila Prabhupada. And I didn't, at that time, of course, everyone thinks, they're special, but I didn't think that. I didn't think that, because I realized that this person had the capacity to relate to every person in the room. That there was and it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't as though it wasn't just that it was a survey glance. He actually connected with every person. Since then, I understand a little more how why or the process that he did that. But Srila Prabhupada was the external manifestation of the super soul. I mean, he's not the super soul. He's the jiva soul, a perfected jiva soul. And because he is a perfected jiva soul, he is transparent to the Paramatma, which is situated within everyone. So there was a direct connection, because the Paramatma within my heart and the Paramatma within his heart were connected. Or no, you and I, our connection is covered due to the false ego and the conditioning that we are in. But in his case, there was no covering. There was no false ego. So the spirit soul and the Paramatma were in perfect harmony. So he could know perfectly what was in my heart, because as much as the Paramatma knows, he knows. And so throughout, since that time, in meeting with him, I sensed that more, that he knew directly. I mean, it said that the Paramatma is closer to you than you are to yourself. I mean, there couldn't be anyone closer. And Srila Prabhupada was the direct connection. So when he spoke, I understood it to be that Paramatma was speaking. And didn't understand at that time, but now I think I understand a little better that was the case. And he explained that once. I wasn't present, but it's a famous story. I know that you've probably heard it many times, but I'll tell it again because it bears repeating. He was in New York with Ramaswar. This was Ramaswar and some others were in the room. And one of the members of the press asked him, can he speak to God? I believe that was the question. And Ramaswar, and he said yes. And Ramaswar explained to the reporter that what that really means is that God within is the intelligence. And when you take help from the intelligence, you're taking help from God to make it more palatable, perhaps, to the Western mind. Prabhupada stopped him emphatically and said, no, directly. So anyway, the experience in Boston was sort of astounding to me. I was visiting New Vrindavan out of curiosity. It was in the spring of 1970. Spring to me, I wasn't from Atlanta, it was spring there. It wasn't spring in New Vrindavan. It was very wintry still. I think it was March. And the devotees had obtained a plate of prasadam from Los Angeles, where Prabhupada was staying at the time. And they were passing it out. They're making a big, a big production out of this prasadam was from Prabhupada's plate personally. And I was very skeptical. But I happened to get a raisin from the plate. There was one of those golden raisins. Prabhupada said the other ones were burnt. He said burnt, or sometimes they look like insects. He didn't like the black ones. So I took this golden raisin and popped it in my mouth. And I mean, it was an experience. I mean, it tasted like a golden raisin, but the intensity of the taste was magnified thousands of times. This day, I love golden raisins. I still eat them. I began to realize what the devotees were talking about. This was this was something extraordinary. This personality was something very different from what we'd experienced before, or since, or any time. We went to the airport first, obviously in Boston, and my wife gave him a garland. It's interesting because sometimes they say that the women should not be allowed to give garlands to Prabhupada, Guru Puja or whatever. She gave him a garland. She was not even initiated. I think she got initiated there at the time. She gave him a garland, and he smiled and gave us hands. And then, so they went to New York, and we went to see him in New York. I was temple president at that time, I think. In fact, I became temple president before I was initiated. That was some of the advantages of being in the frontier of Krishna consciousness. Atlanta was a small temple, and Tallahassee opened up. Temple president was sent to Tallahassee to manage that temple, and so they asked me to be temple president, so I became temple president. So as being temple president was the advantage that you could write to Srila Prabhupada. That was a tremendous advantage because by that time they had, previous to that, anyone could write to Srila Prabhupada. But then it was getting too much mail, so he asked that the temple president may write on behalf of all the devotees. So there was a great competition to be temple president that we could write to Srila Prabhupada. And also, you could go to where Srila Prabhupada, if Prabhupada was visiting the U.S., you could go there, and then you could go into the room. So we went into the room, myself and a number of the other temple presidents. And he said, "Where are your wives?" He said, "Where's your..." We went in without the wives, and he said, "Where's the wife?" I said, "Husband, wife is protection for husband. When husband goes traveling, wife should also go." So Srila Prabhupada gave a nice lecture, and then he began to sort of banter with the people, and he picked out the Indian. So he picked out this Mohanty. So he smiled, and very cordial, very friendly, very loving with this man. But of course, Mohanty was young enough to be his son, really. Mohanty was probably 40-something at the time. Dr. Mohanty, actually. So what part of India, where are you coming from? He's from Orissa. But Mohanty was a little proud because he was an educated man, and he was a PhD in biology. So he said, so Prabhupada said, "So, why have you come, where are you from? Orissa? So why you have come to the USA, to America?" "So I am a biologist," as though, now be proud of me. I'm your countryman, and I've succeeded in the material. I've got my degree in biology. I'm an important man, a professor. See, be proud of me. Prabhupada said, "Oh, poor frogs." And the room just exploded in laughter. So Mohanty, of course, Mohanty is nice enough to be, the butt of the. He's a nice fellow. I mean, if it really hurt him, Srila probably wouldn't have done it. So Mohanty protested, and he said, No, it is for science. It is for science." And Prabhupada laughed, and he said, "Oh, we'll take your body for science." and amid the laughter, Mohanty said, "Yes, I'll do." And Prabhupada he laughed. He said, "No." He said, this inquiry of science is not very important. It is better to study the Vedas, study the Srimad Bhagavatam. We gave a Sunday feast lecture. Atlanta is right in the middle of the Bible Belt. So many Christians. He gave a lecture about Christianity. Some people, we had a lot of guests, and one fellow who became a devotee, his name was Peter at the time. He's now Paramparadas. So he was one of these seekers who had studied many different. So when another fellow who was very much into the Sikhs, the 3HO ashram. So Prabhupada talked about Christianity, and he talked to the Christians, and he told them basically Christ is our guru, and very nicely. That one very nicely. And then this man in the back said, "Who is Guru Nanak, Srila Prabhupada?" No. What happens to followers of Guru Nanak? Prabhupada said, "The followers of Guru Nanak are indeed fortunate." So being emboldened, now this other one, Prabhupada gradually became Prabhupada. He said, "Prabhupada." He said, "Prabhupada." "Yes." "Who is Mayor Baba?" I said, "I do not know. There are so many bogus Babas. Just know who is Krishna, that is sufficient." So it was wonderful. This man was, he was very hard because we've been preaching to him, but he was very resilient. But at that moment, he surrendered. He became a devotee of Prabhupada. It was very nice. We would make resolutions, and then Srila Prabhupada would approve them. So, in fact, sometimes he would attend our meetings. He used to chastise us that why is it taking so long for your meetings? So you should finish up your business in 2 days, maybe 3. We'd be meeting for weeks. They finish up your business in 2-3 days, then remainder time you should discuss how we can become Krishna conscious and give Krishna consciousness to others. Finished. So he would come and sit he would sit and he said, first you should make a proposal, then it should become resolution. Proposed resolution, then resolution. Not simply discussing. So this was one particular time. We were on the veranda. We were all sitting and around him, and we kind of trailed out like an oblong. And he sat at one end on his, he had an asana where he was sitting. And the sun of Mayapur, and his heart was obviously absorbed in Chaitanya Leela and various ecstasies. And meanwhile, externally, these disciples, these young disciples were holding their GBC meeting. And someone made a proposal, and the proposal was debated back and forth. Someone gave this opinion, someone gave that opinion. And so then it became time for a vote. And it was a vote, yay or nay. So I think probably the vote first was yay, those in favor. And so they said, all those in favor, raise their hand. So he looked around, and first one would raise their hand, then the other. And so then it became clear. It became clear who was the majority. That the majority in this particular vote was going to be in favor of the resolution. So once that became clear, Prabhupada, he raised his hand too. he said, "Yes, I'll also vote for it." He wanted to see first what the majority was. Then he also voted. But sometimes and then he laughed. Of course, he was making funny joke. But sometimes he was much more serious about our resolutions. We took our resolution to him. I think it was the first time I was on the GBC, the first meeting that I had. I was there. In this particular meeting, the resolution was passed that women, amongst other things, that women who had no husband could not live in the temple if they had children. Women with children and no husband could not live in the temple. And the justification was that this was a tremendous drain on the temple finances, because if she has a child, she can't go on Sankirtan, and you've got to give money for the child, and so on, and that really the husband who has fathered this child should take responsibility, and it wasn't practical, and there's no real place for him. How can you put a woman with a child in the Brahmacharini ashram? It's disruptive, and there's no place. We can't get an apartment for every woman with a child. It's just not practical. So we have to draw the line somewhere, and we can't let women with children and no husband live in the temple. So we go. So the standard was Srila Prabhupada would attend. I told you before how he would attend a meeting, but he would attend for a little bit, then he would go to his room. And so once the resolutions were all fixed, they would have to then be read to Srila Prabhupada for approval. And typically, he would approve the resolutions. They would be read and sort of one after the other, and then so he would shake it and so it would be approved. So this time, he got to that resolution and he read it, that women without husbands may not live in the temple. So after he read it, there was, silence. And you could feel that this one was worse than the others. And so there was nothing said. There was a period of silence, and finally Srila Prabhupada said, Srila Prabhupada, should we change that one? And Prabhupada said, He didn't open his eyes, and he said, as far as I am concerned, my only desire is that they will become Krishna conscious. And he went on to say, it does not matter. They are women, children, without children, with children. I only want to give them the opportunity to be Krishna conscious. He still didn't open his eyes. And you could just feel the emotion, the compassion, the ocean of compassion. And here we were, just foolish, manipulating management. So Sasaruddin said, we'll withdraw that one, Prabhupada. And so I think that whole day's worth of resolutions were scrapped. And we went back and we started over again. And we changed them. He never actually said, you have to. But by his response, it was clear that we were on the wrong path. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was there. And he thought that it'd be nice if we had a special ceremony for Bhaktisiddhanta, in which so he said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, the devotees would like to see you do arti to Bhaktisiddhanta. Prabhupada said, oh, they would like to see? Yes, Sir Prabhupada. Then I will do. So he came and he did the arti to Bhaktisiddhanta. It was a gorgeous sight to behold. The way he offered the paraphernalia was astounding. I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen the way he did it, but the circles that he made it's almost like circling. It was like an orbit. It was gorgeous. Every movement was perfectly coordinated. And but we did somehow or other in setting up the arti tray. People were so beside themselves with the experience of what was happening that someone had not put a bowl for the conch shell water. So I'm standing next to him. I'm holding the arti tray because that's my job as stone president. And so he offers the water, and now it's time to put a little bit into a container. And so he looks at me, and there's nothing there. So now, of course, everyone's attention is focused on Prabhupada. So everyone's now this is a crisis. What to do? And I'm looking around. There's a sea of devotees. So there's and I'm motioning, and so but to get a container from the kitchen or the pujari room to come out to the place of the arti would have taken But he stood there. He stood, and he wasn't going to let us off. He wasn't going to let me off the hook so easily. It wasn't, because I mean, conceivably, you could just, go on and do do another offering. But he wouldn't do that. He stood there, and now it's a crisis, And so then it became apparent that I was not going to be able to solve the crisis quickly and easily. We had a tulsi on the Vyasasan, so he took the water from the conch, and he just, with a flip of his wrist, the water just sort of shot from the conch shell into the tulsi plant pot. And so, although everyone was having kirtan, the kirtan stopped for just a moment for everyone to go, Haribo, Haribo. The intelligence. I remember once we were in the room with him, and someone said, we were discussing In God We Trust, and someone said, Prabhupada, if we take the government, he said, we will make them all, we will finish all these nonsense religions. The Prabhupada said, oh, why? He said, we have no quarrel with these religions. Merely we'd like to see that they practice them, that they actually practice their religion. That is our only, that we would like to see. So I just sort of on a whim wrote to Srila Prabhupada, maybe I'll also run for mayor, like Amarendra had done. And just to sort of, because as I said, we used to be able to write to Srila Prabhupada. So I wrote this in one line, and came back the letter from him. The whole letter was encouraging me to do this. Most of whatever else I had mentioned was, he responded, but not very much. He went on about, we must set the perfect example in all fields of life, why not politics? So now he has become, his response, if I made one suggestion of maybe equivalent of a 1, his response was 100. And so now I'm stuck because Srila Prabhupada, wants me to do this. So we corresponded a number of times, and he told me what to say, and so I ran for office, and it was a wonderful experience. It was just like with Amarendra, we were able to debate these fellows in public. He told me to concentrate. He told me to concentrate on the spiritual side of the issues, that not to get too much into all the details of the issues that were in the election, but we can give them Krishna consciousness. So that's what we did. So basically, it was like a Bhagavatam class, and he said, they've come here thinking that they'll solve all their problems here. This is like this place is like a prison house or a hospital, and these people are like the sons of a very wealthy man who have come to the prison house by misfortune, and somehow they've gotten the idea that they will make a solution of all their problems in the prison house. But they will never find happiness in the prison house. They've forgotten their position as the sons of very wealthy man. So this should be remembered. This is the sum and substance of the purpose of human life. You speak like this. So, basically we did that. And so it was, we didn't get so many votes. So I wrote to him. So after the election was over, I wrote to him, I said, we didn't get so many votes, and he wrote back, it doesn't matter, you have not gotten many votes. He said, I have seen that you have not compromised our philosophy. My spiritual master also never compromised. So you have not compromised. Krishna will note what you have done to try to make them Krishna conscious, and I am proud of you. So go on in this way, and there is no failure for the devotee. So it was I was a little discouraged, perhaps, from not getting as good a response as what we had hoped from the public. So he was encouraging us. Then the last thing was that Rupanuga wrote to him about. Rupanuga wrote to Prabhupada asking permission for himself to go to law school, and then he just put in that he also got permission for me, although I had not asked Rupanuga to do that. And they had a lot of other people listed that were all going to go to law school. There's a whole list of people who are all going to go to law school. So Amarendra had gone, and Rupanuga was going to go, and I was going to go, a bunch of other people. So Prabhupada wrote back, yes, you may go, but not that all of our men should become lawyers. He said, but in Balavanta's case, I can understand that he wants to use this for political preaching. So in that way is all right. But not that everyone should become a lawyer. And he said, I've always wanted a lawyer on the GBC. That was the basis for Rupanuga's permission. I've always wanted a lawyer on the GBC. In the airport, everyone in the airport, I'm not exaggerating, the consciousness was on Srila Prabhupada. I mean, he commanded that much attention. This was a busy metropolitan airport. And the way he walked, with his head, was so regal that people deferred to him. People, here was obviously a very important person. It's almost as though when the lion goes through the jungle, the other animals, they make way. And so people made way, and he was perfectly comfortable in those circumstances. So he had his cane, and we had a room, VIP room, which they provided for us. We made a Vyasa-san. It wasn't much of a Vyasa-san. As a matter of fact, it was a cushion with some legs on it we had made very hurriedly, and we placed this asana on top of a table. Remember, we were 22 years old, and we were coming out of the most, unregulated lifestyle. So everything was a daze for us, and we were all young. There wasn't an older person amongst us, and so we got this. But we figured it had to be high, and there were chairs for everyone else. So we put this asana on the table, and so Prabhupada, he was, even amongst such unqualified people, to me now, a 22-year-old is another generation. You treat them really as your children to give them guidance. Of course, as they get 16, they're treated as equals. Nonetheless, they're young adults who need guidance. In his case, he was old to be our grandfather. And yet, he was allowing us, of course, he wasn't really allowing us, he was allowing Krishna. He was completely in Krishna's hands, but we were the people Krishna had sent somehow. So wherever we told him, go here, he would go. Okay, where do we go now? Go here. So we go in this room, and we take him up, and we walk up to the table. and so that's the stopping point, is the table. So he doesn't. So we say to him, "This is your seat." And he looks at us, and he with this question, and we say, "Oh, it's sturdy, Srila Prabhupada." And you could see he was, it was against his better judgment, perhaps. I don't want to, I can't understand the mind of the Acharya, but in any case, we had a little step for him, and he climbed up on this table and sat on the asana. He was just very charitable to us. I mean, he just, rather than hurt our feelings, he would do something which, a gentleman of his age to walk on top of a table and sit on this wooden asana with a cushion on it. But because we had done it for him, and because we were trying in our immature way to honor him, he accepted it. I mean, something that a materialistic gentleman would have just said, "This is not right. Get this out of here. Don't you have something that's more? Don't mind. I'll sit on the chair." And the other said, "No, don't be so foolish." But it was nothing of that nature in him. It was a loving exchange. We put on a play. I didn't put on the devotees put on a play A very nice play. He liked this play very much. It was, he made very clear his pleasure this play. It was Leela. It was Chaitanya Leela. And he told how when he was young, he had been in a play of Lord Chaitanya Leela. And when the play was, they had to rehearse it and rehearse it and rehearse it and rehearse it for years. And when they put on the play, everyone, at the end of the play, everyone in the audience was crying. And he said, I did not know why they were crying. And he said, the play should be on this standard. But we put on the play of the Kazi, Lord Chaitanya and the Kazi. And he liked it very much. He laughed. And when they said, one of the Brahmins said, if we give the holy name to the common people, it will expand. It will be too expanded. And Prabhupada laughed and he said, it is already expanded. It is already expanded. It cannot be stopped. And so another thing was that he participated in the play. Yeah, he would interrupt. He'd interrupt the play and make statements. Then we had a broken mridanga. One of those clay mridangas that was broken beyond repair. So we sort of repaired it with plaster of Paris. And then at one point in the play, for drama, when the Kazi's men came to stop the kirtan, one of the Kazi's men picked the mridanga up and threw it on the ground. His eyes got big. It was like, a great offense. And so I was near the Vyasasan, so I whispered, it's already broken, probably. It's already broken. I don't think that placated him too much. I mean, he didn't get angry, but we would never do that again. I had the opportunity to talk with him a little bit about the play. He said, yes, this play is so nice. There should be more plays on this standard. Devotees had worked very hard for this year, probably did many rehearsals. He said, yes, whatever you do sincerely for Krishna will be a success. One interesting thing was I was very tired because we had been up 24 hours. And so I think he was there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and he left on Monday, I believe. So on one of those mornings, I guess it was Sunday morning, I missed Mangalarti. I usually don't, but I was tired, and so I didn't get up for Mangalarti. So there was a small group of devotees in his room, and he said, one thing is, the devotees here do not go to Mangalarti, and there had been a huge Mangalarti. So I said, oh yes, Prabhupada, they go to Mangalarti. They had Mangalarti. He says, We went to the morning walk at a park, which was at the base of the Atlanta skyline. It's like Central Park in New York in the sense that it's close into the city. Atlanta skyline has become since then actually quite impressive, but at the time it was growing, and Atlanta was a up-and-coming city, and they were, and they still are really into being, trying to become the next great city and very urbanized, and they're totally immersed in this consciousness. So we walked, and Prabhupada looked at me, because I was the temple president there, so he was speaking to me, and he pointed to the skyscrapers, and he said, do not be impressed. He said, do not be impressed. He said, Krishna will finish it in a moment. This was an era when the book distributors and the devotees who stayed at the temple to do temple services were in some degree of tension. And the book distributors sometimes would, independent of the devotees who stay at the temple, would sort of exaggerate their position to some degree. For example, sometimes they would say that only the book distributors are gopis and everyone else. These things would be said. And it would cause anxiety in various devotees. But there were the quotes where Prabhupada said, you know, if you wanted the best thing, go distribute my books and so on. So a lot of these book distributors were at the temple for Prabhupada's visit. So after the Sunday feast, there became a time for questions. One devotee raised his hand. He was obviously a book distributor. And he said, Prabhupada, he apparently had the mind that he would resolve this dispute once and for all from Srila Prabhupada's own lips, and that would be a definitive answer. And so he raised his hand and he said, Srila Prabhupada, what pleases you the most? So everybody goes, oh boy. So great anticipation of what would come. Prabhupada without a very quick, immediate response when you love Krishna. And Haribo! It was a very pleasing answer. He came in the temple room and he took his seat on the Vyasan, which had just, everything was fresh. I mean, it was a brand new, people had worked literally, 24 hours for a week. In fact, Prabhupada commented when he got to his room, wherever I go, there's always the smell of fresh paint. But then he laughed. But so he goes into his Vyasasan, and everyone gets in the temple room. It takes a few minutes, and it's almost hushed. And sit down, and the devotees, I mean, it's standing room only, but somehow most of the devotees are in the temple room, and there's some large doors so they can kind of spill out in the hallways onto the porch. And it's a silence. I think Prabhupada at that point chanted Paramakaruna for the first time. Pahundwijana Nitai Gaura Chandra. And he chanted it every time he came to the temple room during that visit. After the chant, he gave his opening address. And first of all, he got everybody totally ecstatic by saying, he said, on my tour I have been, he said Los Angeles, I think Mexico City, Caracas, Miami. And he said, now I've come to Atlanta and I see your temple is the best. Everybody. That was a start. But then, probably, more importantly than that, Srila Prabhupada began to address, he gave his opening address, and he said, Radha and Krishna, Krishna came and he demanded surrender. Lord Chaitanya does not make such demand. He simply distributes love of God to everyone. So as he began this lecture, this address, the devotees, I think all of us settled down to hear Prabhupada's speaking, and we had heard this concept before, but of course everyone was hanging on every word, but we didn't expect what was to take place after that. He was speaking in a normal voice, and then he stopped. And there was silence. And you could see his eyes were closed and the tears were coming from his eyes. It was like if you turn on a faucet and you try to hold your hand to keep the water in, but the pressure is such that you can't and the water leaks out. It's like the pressure of his eyes. It was almost as though if he were to open his eyes, they would shoot, like you see described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But then he opened his mouth to speak, to go on speaking. The words wouldn't come out. You could see that the emotion within was like a volcano. It was like almost shaking. You could see that the body was filling with emotion. And he tried 3 or 4 times to go on with his speaking, and he just couldn't. So then, no one knew what to do. We did not, know what is the etiquette. It's like he didn't know whether you should get up, or whether you should begin chanting, or you should just be quiet, because it was a it was an intimate thing, and yet we're in a public room with all these people. And so you could see him struggling within to go on. And finally he was able to speak, but he couldn't, but his voice, it was like, it barely came out. And when it did, it was very high. His voice was very high because it was a struggle to speak. And when he could speak, he said, just take shelter of Lord Chaitanya and be happy. Chant Hare Krishna.
Je anilo